Welcome to Behind the Dub, the podcast series talking to voice actors about their experiences in the industry, as well as the shows they work on. Just before we start, I'd like to ask that if you like what you hear, please consider liking, subscribing, following, or commenting. This all means a lot to me, and it can help make more episodes happen in the future.
Alrighty, well, my name is Blythe Melin. I'm what I would like to consider an international voice actor. I was raised military, lived around the world, started my career back when I was living in Japan, and started going full-time maybe a year or two ago at this point.
That's just so cool, because there seems to be in the most recent times that we've had quite a few new talent spring up because of the pandemic and all that, and I think it's just fantastic that people have been able to establish themselves within sort of the past year or two. I was introduced to yourself because you are Charles Arbor in the anime series Chronicles.
Yes, that was a fun one, and remote.
And it was all remote work, yeah.
Yeah, at this current time, as of note, I have not done any in-studio work. All of my jobs have been remote.
That was going to be my question. I was like, have you done any studio work, but everything's been remote?
Yeah, not currently. My whole career, the past 2-3 years, worth has all been remote. Slowly building up my booth to industry standard and making those connections that are willing to work remotely.
That's really cool. So what possessed you to pursue this line of work?
It's funny because it's the cliche thing that people tell you shouldn't be the reason you start. Growing up, I'm sure I'm a young guy with that voice, so everyone that I knew was like, "Wow, you've got such a cool voice. You should do radio or something. Like, you should do something with that." And for the longest time, I just shrugged it off. And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, no, I got a cool voice. Thank you, though." But come college time, I kind of sat down and wondered, like, maybe I should do something with it. Like, how hard could it be to just try and start doing stuff like in voice acting? Because once you recognize, hey, there are people that do this for a living, and they get to act, and they don't have to be on camera. They get to really just be goofy with it and try to fulfill the role of a character. And I've found a lot of fascination in 2D art and fantasy world settings, and I really just wanted to give that a try. So I think I really hopped into it. I think before I even did my research, I bought like a $200-300 bundle with the same interface that I'm still using now, like a Audiobook i2 AT2035, and I just got to work. Like, I wouldn't say fan projects and stuff, because back then I tried to be cautious
Yeah.
on what jobs that I was auditioning for, because I didn't want to start off too amateur. I wanted to go in with a professional mindset as much as I could at the time. So I would kind of sift my way through the jobs that I could see through, like, fan work sites, or you know public casting sites, basically. And I think I did that for a while. It wasn't too long until I got into my first video game, at least paid, called Masked Memories, which
Okay.
that was a fun one. It was a narrative text-based little adventure game, and yeah, it was a fun audition, really fun job. I recorded it all within like a 2 foot by 4 foot Japanese sliding door closet, where you could still hear my computer's desk fan going off on the other side of the room. Like, the
Going off like a jet
quality
engine.
yeah, my quality at the time, in retrospect, was absolutely terrible. But it did the job. I got paid for it. I go back and I still think it's a pretty good performance. And from there, I just kind of went to the races.
So, do you audition just for anything that comes your way, or are you a bit more like, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, or do you just go for everything?
I personally, I do have discretion, because how I've gotten most of my online work remotely has been through pay-to-play sites, which is not everyone's endeavor. For me,
Yeah.
it's turned out fortuitous, but because of that, I have to use discretion on what jobs I want to audition for, and I do think auditioning for the ones that I'm best suited for tends to save me both time and effort, because I'm not even guaranteed those ones.
Yeah.
I have to look at it and say, are they really going to consider my voice, or am I going to be the one that stands out that they want to think about? Like, you have to really discern, is it something that's even worth them listening to, the casting director for that project? Um, when it comes to like personal, like emailed casting calls straight to me for like anime or video
Hmm.
games and stuff like that, like if it's inbox stuff, I look at every character I apply for, and those ones I apply for all of them.
So if
I use those opportunities to like practice, diversification. I want to expand my range and use it as a practice session, if anything. I know it's maybe not the best impression for some people, but I think it's an opportunity wasted if you don't do that.
well, sometimes you do have to take every opportunity presented to you, and it's just I do wonder from because I've talked to quite a few voice actors now, and they do say that most of your time is auditioning for roles that you'll probably never hear from again.
Yep.
And so, how has it sort of been for yourself, knowing that you've done all these auditions and this, and you don't hear anything? How do you sort of cope with that, or do you just kind of, no, that doesn't bother me. I'm going to focus and just keep pushing on.
Personally, I don't tend to, let my mind stick to it. I know a few friends that they do get caught up in it every once in a while, which it's only natural. If work's not as consistent with how much effort you're putting in, if you're
Mm.
constantly auditioning and you just don't get that lucky break, it does get to some people. Personally, I try not to let it get in my head. I just kind of audition and then throw it out of my mind completely. Like a lot of things I do in life, I'm just like, "Oh, that was a fun experience," and then move on straight to the next. That way, when it comes back to me, I'm like, "Oh, I got something. What's this? Oh, it was for this thing. Oh, that's awesome." And I think it's funny because sometimes you're like, "Yeah, I knew I was a shoo-in for that," and other times you look at it and you go, "I forgot I even auditioned for this, and also, why did they choose me for this one?" And even
Uh,
funnier, Charles is an example of that. Out of all the characters I auditioned for on that show, Charles was the last person that I actually thought my
no
vocal
way.
tone would fit. I personally thought I had no shot for him compared to, the rest.
Mm.
I thought I had even a better chance at Rio over Charles, which I don't have the youngest sounding voice, which I'm glad my friend Kieran got, because he's fantastic as Rio. But
Yeah.
once I saw it on Charles, though, I could not say that I was disappointed. Like, I thought it actually kind of blended, and I had to learn to give myself more credit.
Well, on just speaking of Spirit Chronicles, on Crunchyroll, it not sponsored, but it's on Crunchyroll, and episode 2 just dropped, and
Yep.
so essentially it'll be the second time that Charles and Rio have met, but it is you and Kieran actually talking to each other, and yeah, I can see you two having a good chemistry. Although I will say, from the only 2 episodes that are available, yeah, Charles is kind of a dick, shall I say?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, not to throw out any spoilers, but he ain't a good guy. Which, to credit, I think those kinds of villains are integral to a lot of
Mm.
stories, so I'm more than happy to help fill out that role. I think an absolutely cretinous villain, uh, is, like, key to any good story, because you need someone who you can really learn to hate to make everyone else seem that much better.
Yeah, because I like asking this sort of question, but do you want to be a hero or do you want to be a villain?
Ooh. I mean, if I had the choice, I think I want to keep it a good mix of both, but I
Mm.
do think, my voice and, my mannerisms and stuff tend to lean more favorably towards villainous or kinda neutral grounded characters.
Because I was speaking to Jason Manoka, and he's like, villains, they're always better dressed.
It's true! It's true, they're so fashionable, that's part of being a villain, you gotta catch some eyes first.
Yeah. Oh, but I say one of the first times we see Charles, this is literally episode 1. He is beating up an orphan. It's like,
It's a great first impression.
yeah. And so yeah, I'm definitely interested in Spirit Chronicles. I think the dub cast is fantastic. I'm one of these people who I'll watch a sub and then a dub, or sometimes I'll just watch a straight out dub. I'm not really that picky because I love dubs. I love all the work that goes into them, and I think from what I've heard, the cast so far in Spirit Chronicles is really, really good.
Hmm.
And
I definitely think they cast well for a lot of them.
yeah, and so what? How was your experience recording for Spirit Chronicles? Obviously, because it was remote in this day and age at the minute. Did you have good direction, or was it just yeah? How did it go basically?
It was absolutely phenomenal. No joke, hands down to date. It was my favorite directed session. The first one, I'll admit, started off slow because I tend to be a bit of a like an introvert in many
Hmm.
regards. So first sessions with new directors for me, I'm semi timid, trying to get to know the ropes of what it's like in that environment. But the second session we had, it was an absolute blast. Like we got through the work, we had fun. They allowed me to ask questions and put my piece and advise on certain lines and takes and inflections. And it was just the whole thing was an interactive experience, which is everything I'd ever ask for in a
Mm.
directed session for any project. So to have that on what is technically my first anime, I couldn't have been happier. I,
Oh, that's
I know many other
wonderful.
people who are not as lucky to have such a session like that. So I am so grateful for everything. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just looking at your resume on your website, and so you've done a good few video games, a couple of animated things. Although you said is it just one anime you've done now, which is Spirit Chronicles?
Yes, currently the only anime I've done is Spirit
Yeah.
Chronicles, and I'm happy that I got it because that was part of the reason I recently wanted to move back to Texas. Is because one of the things I hadn't tackled before was dubbing an anime. To get that experience,
Mm.
hopefully, it's just the start to a whole new venture because it's fun. That it was fun. I think
I
out of all the live directions I've had, being directed for dubbing was the most fun I've had.
I certainly hope to hear you in more roles because there's so much choice in anime these days, and they seem to be dubbing quite a lot as well, which I think is great. You know, the more shows that get more exposure, all the better with me. That's my personal opinion.
Yep,
And
yep.
you've done commercial work and you've done audiobooks, so you have done sort of the gambit of the usual voice actor, where you've kind of done a little bit of everything, really.
Yeah, I try to dabble in everything that I can. I think it's valuable as a person. Try as much as you can.
Yeah, because you mentioned that you should do radio work. I've had people say that to me. He says, "Oh, you should do commercials on the radio." I says, "Yeah, because I've got a face for radio."
Yeah.
But also, you've done audiobooks, "The Everyday Life of Abraham Lincoln," 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, and Hellhounds of the Cosmos. Three titles that are quite different to each other, in my opinion.
Oh yes. The three different production teams behind those. One of them was a research firm for Abraham. So is that one was very
Oh,
technically challenging for me because what they wanted was to analyze how my speech pattern worked, which, in some regards that sounds kind of scary or suspicious depending on the job, but it was actually
yeah.
a very interesting challenge for me regardless, because what I had to do was consistently read each sentence, give 5 seconds of pause between each sentence, and then read that for 30-minute segments each, and then break it down per chapter. And that was like 20 hours worth of work, and the audiobook
Wow.
itself sounded fantastic. It was great because I was learning about Abraham Lincoln the whole way through. Whole a bunch of stuff I didn't know beforehand. It was great stuff. But that compared to other jobs that I've had, like Hellhounds of the Cosmos, that was the first audiobook I was offered to read. Trying to remember, I think it was through Voices of Today,
Yes, it says no
which
voice of today. Yeah.
yep, they reached out to me and offered that because it had just reached public domain, which was what their whole team specialized in, was creating audiobooks
Oh.
of public domain material. And getting to read that, I was like, "Oh, I'd be more than happy to because I love fantasy. I love science fiction. They throw that my way, and it's one of the older, novella, so I just dove straight into it. It was a nice short read, right up my alley for someone who had just started and wanted to get, kind of into audiobooks and give the waters a test drive. It was a great experience. And both of those compared to 12 Rules for Life, they're all just completely different genres, because 12 Rules for Life was like a step-by-step guide to herbs and spices, how to take care of them, their uses in everyday life. All three of these books were
Oh.
completely different objectives. And because they're different producers, you have to produce them somewhat differently post-production wise as well. So just the audiobooks alone have been vastly different experiences, and I'm grateful for each of them.
That, again, it's just fascinating to me, all the different things that even just in a relatively short, career so far, you've done so many just wildly varied things. I just find it really, really fascinating. It's one of the reasons why I just contact you, because I like hearing what it's like for newer people to start up in this industry. Because I've talked to some veterans who have done it for a couple of years now, and then we've got some of the newer people. One of them I talked to recently, know him as a wonderful gentleman called George Peter.
Yep, good friend
And
George.
I loved talking to him. I still do like talking to him, actually.
I was
And
talking to him last night. He's a great friend of mine.
hey, and so in terms of sort of how the dialogue is recorded for all these different things, and with anime, it's the kind of, I forget the technical term for it, because it's kind of, you got 1, 2, 3, and off you go. But other things like audiobooks, you're just reading off a script and such,
Yeah.
or there's prelay. I think it's prelay for video games usually.
The
Um,
yeah, pre prelay pre-life, I think some people call it
yeah,
for speaking beforehand.
there's so many
Yeah.
different terms. That's where it gets confusing. So, since it was your first anime, how was it for you to deal with the system that they use? Because it's the 3 beeps and then off you go. Did you find it just a walk in the park, or were you like, what is this mysterious nonsense?
It's it's a different experience, which is why I wanted to dive into it all those months ago. Because I'd say the first or second quarter of 2021, uh, I joined a ADR practice session workshop with Brooke Chalmers and Ben Diskin
Oh,
because I really had no experience with ADR and dubbing, and I wanted to get some sort of practice in just in case I landed a job, where that's the norm. And practicing that in the session, the acting and the voice that I put out for the character they assigned me was great. But what I had trouble with was the beeps, landing it on time, keeping with the tempo of the character and the original
mm,
soundtrack. It was so difficult for me because it's so drastically different to how I normally perform. I tend to self-direct for most of my work. Very, very few of the projects I've actually worked on have been directed. Only more recently, the bigger projects I've been on have I had a live directed call going on, so they could tell me and give me critique on what they need. But every other job, for example, King Arthur Knight's Tale, which I'm playing Sir Kay,
mm-hmm.
all of those dialogue lines were self-directed, and I did not receive critique or anything on those until I had submitted all of my files and they had the chance to listen to them, and then they say, "All right, this line here, can you go back and do it this way?" That would be the most critique I'd get on projects like that. So I had to learn, you know, listening through my own ear during the recording session, did I like that? Would they like that? Is it what they need in the moment? And to compare that to ADR and dubbing, it's so drastically different because your first take could be completely different from what the director's wanting. Because
Yeah,
some directors want to change it up from the original dub. Uh, but that also pulls on the technical difficulty of you have 3 beeps or you have, your karaoke bar and you
yeah.
have to sync that up, get the emotion in there, make sure that you add the spacings correctly because, it's anime. You could have a guy talk like this and then he adds a dramatic 2-second pause where normally in casual realistic speech, you wouldn't have that.
No.
It's meant to over dramatize. And that itself is a huge game changer because you have to learn that anime has these certain quirks that I myself am not accustomed to yet. It's one of my weaker points. But I hope it's something I can learn over time because
Yeah.
there are people who absolutely excel at it and they wish they could do, a more believable, grounded takes for video games and things like that. And I'm like, hey, That's your specialty. My thing is those grounded, believable takes because that's what I think most performances should be. So anime is something I need to work on personally if I want to keep working, because I think it's such a useful skill set to have, is to be able to switch on and off between those different niches of acting. Um,
Have you
I've
done a
I've
lot of
mumbled on.
theatre acting at all? Have you done? Did you ever do a lot of on stage or?
So the most I've done on stage really was kind of two things. I did back in like 8th grade. I did a play of Midsummer Night's Dream as Oberon, the
Oh
Fairy
right.
King. Yes, it was a very fun time. It actually was one of the things that kind of got me interested in acting further on. I didn't do theater or anything throughout high school, mostly because I bounced high school to high school like 3 separate times during my 4 years. But in college, I took a beginner's acting class over at University of Wyoming, and that was a very nice time. It got me back into the sense of how to improv or act or dramatize with my body rather than just my voice. So hopefully in the future I'll give that a dabble again because it's certainly fun. I do like theater work, although I think it is a relatively different realm in many regards than a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of on-screen and voice acting.
Because a lot of voice actors, some that I've talked to, have kind of come from a stage background, or they did a lot of stage work in
Hmm.
their high school, and then they sort of went, "Oh, but I like this, but I don't like being on stage. I want to be behind a microphone instead and do it this way." Or
Yep, I
and
know a few friends just like that.
another question I love asking is, "Can you sing?"
Can I sing? I've been told I have a singing voice, but I am not professionally trained, so I'd like to say no.
Because I found it's either yes I can or oh my god no please don't ask, because that's
I'm
usually the
totally
two.
the no, I'm totally the person that if someone asked me to, I would at least, attempt it. I'm not vocabulary, familiar with all the techniques and stuff with singing, but I'd be happy to try. I'm probably not the best choice if you want someone who's, professionally trained in it, but it is what it is. If they want to hear it.
So you said that you wanted to do an anime and you want to do more anime. Do you watch any yourself, or is it just something you want to do professionally? You don't really want to watch any.
I watch anime, not frequently. I have these ups and down periods where I'm like, I'm gonna binge a bunch of anime, or I'm not gonna watch anime at all. Which is where the irony of I lived in Japan for 3 years, but that entire 3-year process, I barely watched any anime.
And
And now that I'm back in the States, I'm like, oh, I'll watch this show or two. It's yeah, oversaturation. I don't know, maybe, but I have my ups and downs. Nowadays, I've been trying to get back in the swing of, well, I'm in it, so I might as well start watching more of it. But it's something I had to sink more time into, I think.
because I know that one or two voice actors, if they've got a role, they'll sit and watch the anime so they kind of know how it plays out, and then they'll use
Yeah.
that to play off the character, which I think is, oh, that's kind of neat. But it's like, do you have the time to do that? It's, some do,
Yeah.
some don't. It's
Some
same with
yeah,
those who
some do, some
play video games. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm in the video game, but I have no time to play the video game.
I think I do that more for video game roles than I do any, like, shows and stuff
Mm.
or books. Um, just 'cause I think having a reference for those types of things works out better. I don't know. So I feel like some projects I would watch the source material before acting, but I also try to take to heart like one of the first lessons I was ever told in my first class when I started voice acting with Crispin Freeman. He was like, "You have to get out of your straitjacket," because he gave me like a script of Beast from Beauty and the Beast, and he's like, "Act this out." And of course,
Oh wow.
in my head, I was like, "Well, it's Beast, and he talks like this." And he's like, "No, stop." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You have a preconception in your head. Get rid of it and make a
Oh.
voice your own." And I was like, "Oh my god, he's right." There's my weakness. And ever since then, I've like tried my best to just make completely original takes for every character that I audition for, and then look at the source material.
Let's say that's really good advice. I was just ringing a bell with Crispin Freeman. I'm like, hang on, and I'm trying to remember what I know him from. But he's one of those who's just done a lot. I believe he's Togusa in Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, which is one of my favorite anime series.
Oh,
So to know that you've
he's
also,
been everywhere.
yeah, he's just done so much.
Yeah.
It's just unreal.
I still get baffled every time I hear he's Winston from like Overwatch. I'm like,
Wait,
oh
what?
wow, yeah, that's
Really?
yeah,
I didn't know
yeah.
that.
No, he's Winston, and I was like, what?
Oh
That's the one that
wow.
always boggles my mind.
Oh my goodness! You said you lived in Japan for a few years. I just
Yeah.
it's something I want to do. Me and the husband have had a honeymoon in Tokyo planned for the past 2 years. So we want to go to Japan. So it's just like, oh yeah, I spent a couple of years in Japan. It's just like, oh, you lucky so and so.
Oh yes, I am grateful for it every second. We lived basically mainland Tokyo, just in the middle of the city on an Air Force base.
Oh
Um,
wow.
it was so nice. I am really hoping to go back there as soon as possible. I especially want to go visit Kyoto again because that was my favorite trip the entire time I lived there.
Really? Oh, Kyoto's on the list. We want to try and visit it. So do you know much Japanese yourself, or how did you get by in Japan?
So they're actually very accommodating for English speakers over in Japan. So that got me by like 90% of the time. I took a year of Japanese when I was at school before I graduated, and then from there I was focused on college and stuff afterwards. So
Mm.
sadly, I didn't get to go out too frequently the final 2 years I was there. But now that I'm back in the States, I'm actively trying to relearn Japanese so that if I ever do go back, I'm like, I don't want to be a fool again. I want to be ready. I want to surprise someone. Ugh, it's yeah. I do regret not learning it as intensely while I was there. But yeah, they're very accommodating. It's not as hard as many people think it is going and visiting if you're English speaking.
I will admit it's just a little bit daunting. It's just like, oh, I know some little words of Japanese and that, but you just get a bit worried about the
Yeah.
language barrier when you go there. I've watched
Oh
anime.
yeah.
Does that help? No.
Not entirely, no. I'll admit, even watching anime, like knowing some Japanese, not all of it sticks out to me and like is easy to comprehend watching it. I still have to practice way more to get to that level. But if you ever visit Japan and you speak English, there's plenty of English phrases and stuff to get you around in the streets and stuff. There's plenty of things spelled out in Romanji, which is like English alphabetical characters for Japanese
Yeah.
phrasings to help you understand what's going on and where you're going. It's
'Cause
yeah,
usually they
it's
just go, "Oh, a gaijin," and then
yeah.
just deal with it.
Foreigner, there he is. Get a few strange looks, few gawking people, and that's about it.
Yeah. Again, I'm just looking at your resume here. I love this little skills paragraph you've got here, and you got your dialects and techniques and such. So before I get onto the techniques, how is it for yourself that you can recall accents? I find accents really, really, really difficult. Yeah, I'm barely good at English, let alone any other sort of accent. And you've got General American, American Southwestern, Spanish, Scottish, and English. That's renounced pronunciation, not an RP.
Yeah. Yeah, personally, I'm more well, better suited towards Suffolk English because I lived in Brandon, England for a good 4 years. So I'm
Okay.
more niched into that. The way I work with dialects and accents is I tend to have some sort of key phrase or like I'll try and mumble something out or recall some phrase of like what's some quip from when I lived there or that I've heard from that place that I could say over and over and then, improvise or transition into some short conversation so that I can work my way into speaking in that kind of accent.
Mm.
Uh, so I remember back when I was doing a commercial class, um, I wanted to pull out the Suffolk accent, and I was like, "What's one way to do it? what was one thing I constantly brought up when talking to my English friends while I was there? And I was like, "Oh, we're popping down to the Tesco. We'll go out and what is it? Grab a few pence, grab it from our parents, go down to Tesco, maybe even pop a ride on the metro, and we'll just go around town. We'll just go do things. We'll go to the pub. We'll do something." Uh, and you kind of mumble it. You do whatever you want. It's just improvising or mishmashing a bunch of things together, uh, and trying to really be genuine about it. Because one thing that you also learn when you live in a lot of places is a lot of the times locals, if they speak a different language or have different dialects and phrasing,
Yeah.
if you at least attempt to use their mannerisms and speak in an accented tone, it can make it easier for them to understand what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah. I'll have to say
Japanese, yeah.
when you were sliding into the sort of the English then the Suffolk, it was just like, oh wow, that's actually pretty good.
Thank you. It's been a good while since I've like really talked like that, but that leans heavily into what I'm saying of when I talk to people living back in England, it was a lot easier to have casual conversation if I put on an accent with them because it somehow removes a barrier between the two of you and it helps you learn kind of just the quirky little things of each language, even if it's both English. There's so many smaller things that, you speak to someone who's Scottish, like full blood, born and bred Scottish, and you introduce them to just a general, maybe Southwest American. Their dialects are
Yeah,
completely different.
yeah.
It's so thick that you can't understand what they're saying to each other half the time. And the same thing applies for foreign languages too. You go to a place where people speak Japanese. Uh, what's the term? As stupid as it is, the English, as some people
English,
call
yeah.
it, yep, the English, um, speaking in that way to English learning Japanese citizens sometimes makes it easier for them to understand what you're on about. Because if you're speaking just full on, no holds barred American English, or United Kingdom English, any form of English where you're comfortable speaking fast. You're talking like this. You're getting things out, words after word after word after word, and you're not giving them a second to breathe. It makes it hard for people to comprehend what you're saying when they're learning the language. So if you put dialectual flair on it, so that's similar to the structure of their own language, and you lean more towards that quote unquote English, it makes it easier to comprehend for them because it's closer to their phonetic structure for
Mm.
how they speak. It's what's what's a good way to compare the two? I guess for Japanese, because there's no L's and stuff in their language, there's no lolly lule lo. Um, being
Oh
able to
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
yeah, when you change the structure of how you speak normally and you slow the pace down just slightly and kind of put on that accent to it to make it easier for them, conversations run a lot more smoothly. And once you learn it, you learn how to put that on the fly. It actually makes it easier for you to comprehend what a new language learner is trying to say to you because you can kind of fill in those gaps of what did they mean here? Are they saying what they're trying to say? Like, are you interpreting it right? And it's a whole new world of language learning and diction expansion, vocabulary, blah 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 blah. It's something you learn. Travel more.
Travel more,
Uh,
yeah.
Travel more. You can learn some cultures, and it's something you pick up along the way, regardless. Talking to people.
And just going back onto your skills here, it's I just love this burping on command.
I can, yeah, I can. It grosses people out. I think it's hilarious, but yeah, I
Oh,
definitely can.
I'm not going to ask for a demonstration. I believe you, but
Yeah,
I
I was
just
like,
love it how it's
I don't know if
there.
you want to.
Burping on command. Pained, guttural, awkward, and stuttering is just like
Yep.
I just love how these are quantifiable skills on this resume. It's just brilliant.
I mean, it's not something you would normally think to point out to someone, but when it comes to resumes, you gotta list those because if you can do them on command, there are little niche scenarios where people are like, "Can you do a drunken, bumbling idiot, just belching and sloshing through the street?" And then you say, Matter of fact, yeah, I can. I'm actually really good at that. Let me show you. And you just let it all out, and they're like, "Whoa, I couldn't do that if I wanted to. Even with like 5 cans of soda, I couldn't do that."
Well, exactly. I says I'll need a fizzy drink first.
Yeah.
But so again, it's one of those things. If the point here is like, yeah, if you can do these things, for goodness sake, get them on your resume. Say, look, I can do this sort of thing, because I'm
Yes.
guessing directors and casters really like to know that you can do these things. Because you also got aquatic marsh animals, cute creatures, screeching, cawing, and large monster orcish.
Yes. Again, just as you said it, put everything you think you're good at on a resume that you think someone's going to need for a job. Don't overinflate yourself, mind you. Don't make yourself look cocky or even put something you can't do consistently because that'll get you in trouble.
Oh
Someone will ask
yeah.
for it and you'll be like, well, I can only do it on a Tuesday when the moon's high and it's colliding with the stars and it's actually 2:43 a.m. Like if you can only do it under very niche circumstances, maybe consider not listing it, but offering it should the situation arise.
Or if you can't
Uh,
do it for very long.
yes,
That's the other
don't do something
one.
that's gonna hurt you. Yeah, creature noises especially, know which ones you can do. Large monster and orcish, all the gravelly, big buck tooth kind of characters. Don't list that if it hurts after 2 minutes. You'll hurt yourself,
Yeah.
you'll destroy your throat. Your
It's
voice will
I
be
can do a
gone,
sort
you
of
might hurt.
like an old man voice. Yeah, there's this kind of old man voice, but I can't do it for very long because then it's like.
I did one of those for an audition this week for the first time, like a genuinely wispy old man. And I didn't even think I could get to that point. And I think it's only because the audition for the character I did before that, I had been rasping for a good 5 to 10 minutes. So my voice was already worn to that degree. So when I had swapped to an old man, I got the most genuine, just dry, old sounding breath out of it, and I was like, "That sounded phenomenal." Uh, I certainly hope I can do it consistently. So then the next day, of course, I was like, "Alright, learn the process to get into that, and hopefully, if it doesn't hurt, you can do this or at least practice it." And it seems to be something I can pull out of my pocket now, so I'm really grateful for that.
Is there anything you do to try and like prepare your voice beforehand? Do you do vocal exercises, or do you just get a good strong cup of coffee?
I should. I don't. I
Ah.
have a bad habit of that for a lot of things. Even working out, I'm not one that tends to stretch too frequently. Maybe I'll do it during, but barely ever beforehand. Which, one day is probably going to be to my detriment. The best advice I can give is to do those workouts and warm ups before anything. I think I just talk so frequently before a session that I tend to be warmed up regardless
Mm.
for the most part. But a good example to give on why you should warm up beforehand is if you have two characters, one's a higher pitch and one's a lower register, it's hard to swap back and forth between the two. So you're probably only going to record for one at a time. And if you're the type of person where if you warmed up the entire day talking like this and you're all the way down in your lower register, it's going to be a lot harder for you to kind of get up there and pinch your vocal cords and get that sound out. And to be that goofy, wacky character that everyone wants to hear at that time, he's the comedic relief of the show. After a while, it's going to start to hurt because, you were down here for 12 hours out of the day. So you have to warm up properly. Make sure you're nice and loose in which area of your vocal cord you're actually going to be using that day. If you want to go to those higher pitches, practice talking up here for most of the day and really just get yourself nice and loose into it because if you do that, you'll be able to access that region easier. It'll sound more believable. You won't be stressing yourself. You won't be reaching for any notes or anything. You won't have any dropouts where your voice just gives out because it's too worn down. Exercise caution when you're performing.
I bet you wake up some mornings, you go, "Oh my god, what happened?"
Sometimes. I'm very pro yelling because I think it's fun. But very, very infrequently do I get a morning where I'm like, "Oh my holy cow, I need to not talk for the next 2 hours.
And of course, you got work booked that day, and you're like, "Oh no."
Yeah. Gotta pay the bill somehow. I gotta wait.
Ah, so how frequent has work been for yourself? Has it is it just been off and on, or is it just a constant stream?
I wish it was a constant stream. That's something I'll admit that I'm struggling with now is it's not a constant stream, and a few friends are also in the same pit, with COVID and everything. They worry that because it's not constant, that the work's just not gonna come again. I know that the work's gonna come eventually, as long as you put in the work. However, the downtime in between each job does get to people sometimes. So, personally, I'm trying to find things to fill up that time in between. I think it's good to try and go out and do other stuff between jobs just to give yourself a little more flavor to life.
Yeah.
But personally, no, I'm not someone who works, every single day outside of auditions. I try to audition every single day, but if there's nothing sent my way or nothing on a website that I can audition for, then I just can't work that day. There's not much I can do unless I want to spend that free time training or looking up new techniques and things like that. But you don't have to do that always. You can use that spare time for yourself too.
Mhm. 'Cause, one of the things I was just gonna ask, and you kinda covered it already, was, I said on when you have this downtime, are you trying to, learn new techniques or skills? And, it's just like, do you spend your time practically trying to improve oneself in the industry, or are you just, "No, I'm gonna stream Netflix all day?"
No, I think initially when you first start off, a lot of your time, whether you want to or not, is going to end up being searching how to do something better and to
Yeah.
stand out in your auditions and performances. It'll slow down over time because you'll have a harder time finding things that are new to you that you didn't know, at least in some degree beforehand. However, if you're really intent on doing this as a career, you're always going to learn something. Every single job you do, every single thing you look at, there's always some minor thing to learn no matter what. For
Mm.
instance, I learned better mic technique during the Spirit Chronicle session because during it we caught during one of the streaming bits a bit of distortion. And from everything I had learned up to that point, I had done everything I could outside of just, standing farther and farther back
Mm.
uh, to keep from distorting. However, what I didn't know is that my face somehow was still not off axis enough to avoid my residency distorting the audio, which
Oh, okay.
personally had never been a problem for my ears. But when they showed it to me and really showed Martin and Mike, mind you, they showed. Ooh, excuse me. They they showed me on the spectrogram what to look for and to tell if it's distorting because you might not always notice it, but when they point it out and you know what to look for and then you listen, you can hear it. And after they showed me that the mic picked it up, it wasn't a matter of my gain's too high, the internet's bugging out. It was a matter of my voice carrying so much uh, how do you phrase it? Just physicality to it towards the mic that it was hitting the diaphragm and reverberating it. It was causing distortion physically. Knowing that, I had to reposition myself back up and turn my head even further off axis and shift where my neck was angled. And since then, it has increased my I wouldn't say increase. I would say it's made it far easier for me to move my mic to the side of my face and angle it so it's picking up my audio properly rather than constantly keeping it straight in front of my nose, a good distance away. And that in itself has helped avoid popping and any sort of breathing issues like that. It has helped tremendously. So little details like that, if you can keep your eye out and pick it
Mm.
up, sometimes it snowballs into helping you avoid other issues you've been having. Which, yeah, there's always something to learn. As I said, keep your eye out. Don't think you have to learn every single second of your life, especially if it's only one aspect of your life. Like if you feel you're kind of burnt out or that you've learned a majority of what you can learn in this moment, sometimes you just have to get through a barrier in terms of where your progression is in your job to learn more stuff. And in that downtime, apply for work, audition for jobs, and use the spare time to go try other aspects of life. Go find a spare hobby that you can learn something new about. Go learn sewing. Go figure out design and drafting. Figure out how to storyboard for shows, or learn something else that is cotangent to your job. Like if you want to be an actor, learn how to direct or manage or write scripts. Like there's so many things you can do when you feel like the learning process is kind of peaked for a moment in what you want to do actively for your job. That's something I really advise a lot of people consider whenever they're starting to feel a bit of burnout or like they're not learning anything new
Yeah.
when they really want to keep, progressing and becoming better.
Guys, I was going to say, there's so many voice actors out there who are also voice directors as well.
Hmm.
It's quite a large number. And there's one lady who I hope to get on here at some point, but bless her, she's so busy, a lady called Melly Grant. And she's also, she also writes as well, and she's doing so many other things. It's like, yeah, she really, fingers in all the pies, so to speak. And I do admire the energy that yourself and everyone else seems to just exude. You just seem to have absolute, just almost limitless energy. It's what it comes across. It seems like, oh wow, these guys are all so bright and bubbly, and that you don't ever see the days where you're like, oh, stuff this. Where's that espresso?
Of course, everything's good till someone asks, and then you learn. There's always downsides. There's always upsides. You got to have those downsides. That's what makes the
Oh yeah,
upsides so good.
of course, of course. Is there anything that you can talk about that's coming up that you're excited about, or is it all hush hush as it usually is?
I try not to talk about projects that I'm in before they're allowed to be
Before
announced.
that's no, that's fine.
I'll admit there are like one or two projects that are up for release probably soon that I'm like, oh yeah, woo, like little milestones for me.
Yeah.
And then there's other ones that I'm in that I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to talk about this for a while, but it's
Yeah,
awesome.
so it must be really difficult some days, especially if you're something you're really excited about. And like, I can't talk about this, but I want to talk about this.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like you want to share it, but you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You have your close friends, you have your like family members that maybe you can tell. You could be like, oh, sorry, I gotta go do something. I got this thing, and like if they're really, really close, like if they're your significant other, maybe you can tell them just so they know why it's so important.
Yeah.
But other jobs where it's realistically not going to change anything whether you do or don't tell a friend, it's more favorable to just not tell them, because if they don't know you're in something, they're not going to be curious. They're not going to ask more about it, and there's never going to be the risk of them telling anyone because they don't know about anything that they have to talk about.
Yeah.
Let it be a nice surprise. It honestly works better when it comes out, and then you're like, oh, by the way, I did this thing, and they're like, you're in this, and you're like, yeah, I didn't tell you because NDA. What can I say? Yeah.
But it must be so, especially, I don't know if it's happened to you yet, but it's probably going to happen where you've got a friend who's into a franchise or something, and you end up doing something for that franchise, and you want to tell them, but you're like, I can't tell them because they'll just spill the beans everywhere.
I wish if I could do that. For two series in particular, if I could do it for Final Fantasy, I think
Oh,
that'd be great because my
yeah.
dad's a Final Fantasy nut.
Hmm.
So I think if I did that and then surprised him and he's like, "Hey, this sounds familiar," I think that'd be hilarious. And then there's Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man, I'm just a nut about, and I'm just so curious about the anime for next
Chainsaw
year.
Man?
Or I guess
What?
this year.
I don't. Do you want to me? Okay.
Chainsaw Man, give that trailer a look. It looks so good. I've read through the manga and everything. It's mwah, chef's kiss.
Okay,
I think
yeah,
it's gonna be a
I've
big
just
one.
seen the manga cover here. Okay, I am going to look at the trailer in a bit. But you said Final Fantasy. Yeah, I love Final Fantasy. It's one of my favorite series. I'm not like a super diehard fan, but I've just been playing
Yeah.
through Final Fantasy VII Remake on PC. And it's just, this is so good. But it's also kind of distracting because I've been paying a lot more attention lately to who is who in the voice acting world, and I'm going through like the streets of Midgar, and I'm hearing random characters, and I'm like, hang on, that's Jonah Scott, and that's such a body.
I know that voice. Yeah.
It's so
I do that
distracting.
frequently. Sometimes it's actors that I don't even think about, like, but I hear it and I'm like, I know that voice, and then I'll just stop. I won't be able to have another thought process until I can name that person.
Oh god, because it is about like, hang on, that's such a buddy, and then the other thing that I love is that everyone is connected by this invisible web. It's really unreal, because another thing that you've done is that you were Colonel Ruffs in Brawl Stars.
Yes, currently that's my ticket to fame. He is easily the biggest one I've had so far.
And Stephen Kelly, who I did my first interview for the show with, he's in Brawl Stars. Yeah, and it's like,
he's got two.
He's someone else. I forget where the other one is, but yeah, he's in it too. I'm like, so you've been in that, and you're all connected. Every single one of you who I've interviewed for this show, everyone's connected in at least one way to each other. It's so weird to get through that.
It really is weird when you first see it. You kind of get used to it, and then it makes for good conversation starter whenever you haven't talked to another actor before, when you notice what connects you to. I think for me, like one project I worked on, BADA Space Station, Elsie Lovelock's in that, and I hadn't spoken to her before then, but then seeing we were both in that, I was like, oh, conversation starter. Brought it up, started chatting for a bit, and the same thing applies for like half these other actors. Is they're in this thing too.
So just to sort of start to maybe slowly wrap this up. So you said you've been doing this for about a year, 2 years. Do you honestly think you can keep going? Do you see as in 10 years I'll be doing all this still?
Oh yeah, easily. I don't think now that I've started, this is something I'll ever give up. I might not, always pursue it 24/7. Like, I do hope to enlist and like travel the world and work outside of voice acting in the near future as well. But in the background, I'll always be auditioning and like trying to have fun in this, because now that I know what it's like, I need my hit. I need this. It's fun.
You've been bitten by the bug, and you want more.
Yep. Got the bug. I'm infested. Ugh.
Oh, well, it's been an absolute delight talking to you, Blythe. It really has. Especially,
thank you, Alex.
Everyone who I've talked to has given such a different perspective, and yours is just as special and wonderful as everyone else's. Even though I've talked to people, Ben Diskin, he's been voice acting since the late 80s. I
was like, he's a vet. Before I was even born, he's been kicking it.
Yeah, and it's like, he was voice acting. I was in school, and it's like, oh wow, he's amazing. And you're just as interesting as Ben. You're all wonderful, and I think, I really look forward to seeing more of Charles Arbor in Spirit Chronicles. I want to see how much of a douche, shall we say, he's going to be. He really is a douche.
Wipe. Yep. I'll be sure to put on the performance. I won't dissatisfy.
And I certainly hope to hear you in more anime titles and more shows and games in the future. Yeah, anime is my forte, but I do really hope that you get more work, because you've got such a wonderful voice. I'll say it straight. You've just got a lovely voice.
And fingers crossed. Even more.
And but again, just thank you so much for taking your very valuable time to natter with this fat British idiot,
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for dealing with this scrawny mumbo jumbo mumbler.
Thank you all for being here. Again, if you like what I'm doing, please consider liking and subscribing so I can continue to make more in the future. This is Kraken, signing out.